Good evening, everybody. We'll get started. My name is Jill Lilly. I am the chapter coordinator for ACAP here in Center County. And welcome to ACAP Center County's presentation on communicating with someone living with Alzheimer's and other dementia. It's wonderful to see such a good turnout for this. I would like you to be aware that ACAP is an educational nonprofit, and if you would like more information on ACAP, if you have not been here before, please go to www.acapcommunity.org. You will find a wealth of information there, including podcasts. So keep that in mind. The ACAP Center County chapter would not be possible without the financial support of the following core sponsors. And they are Juniper, Coke Funeral Home, Steinbacher, Goodall and Your Check, and Encompass Health. So we're very grateful to them. Our monthly sponsor this month is Alert One. And here is Vicki James to tell us a bit about Alert One. If you could come up here, that would be great.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Vicki or Victoria. My shirt says Victoria, so whichever I go by either name. Thank you for allowing me to come tonight and to also learn with you about cognitive disorders and so forth. I'm anxious to hear what she's going to say and tell us. Just the background, my father and all his brothers and sisters had this problem, this issue with Alzheimer's and dementia. So I'm anxious to learn this, to hear more about this. As Jill said, I am with Alert One, and we are based in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. We are a company that has medical alerts. Sometimes they're called personal safety alarms, and they're for everybody, actually, and especially for those who have cognitive impairment or memory and dementia. They're especially helpful, even though they can't push the button. We have a feature that I'll tell you a little bit about that can get them help when they fall, or maybe if they're afraid and they can push the button and so forth like that. But how many of you know what a medical alert is? Okay, that's what I thought. Well, how many have always seen the commercial on TV? Yes. Okay. So I won't go into a lot of what they are. I just wanted to tell you that we are Alert One. We've been in Williamsport for 35 years. We've been saving lives, providing the alerts, and we've gotten a lot of reviews. So you can look at our website. And I have a table here in the back that has actual the alerts and a lot of goodies for you to take home with you. And feel free to come and talk to me afterwards. And if you know someone or if you would like an alert, they are now they started out for seniors, but now they're for anyone who wants to be out and about, independent. And also if you are afraid of falling, because we know that falls are the leading cause of injury for seniors as well as everybody. I've been known to fall myself, so that's another reason. The feature I was mentioning is fall detection. They come with an optional feature called fall detection, and that means that the sensors will automatically send a signal to get help based on the speed of the fall, the impact of the fall, and if there's no movement, and they'll get help within seconds, and they won't have to push the button. So even if they can't push the button and they fall, the sensor will know what the difference between the slip and the fall and send a signal automatically. So for tonight's audience and for people with dementia and cognitive impairment, that's what the fall detection would be the best option in the alerts for them so that they can get help. All right, that's everything. It's nice to meet you. I got a chance to stand up there, so thank you.
You're welcome. I have one more announcement, which has to do with folks who have had a stroke. The Nice College of Nursing on campus is doing a study, and they're looking for 3 people over 65 who've had a stroke and what their quality of life is like after the stroke. It's an interview, I think not even a very long interview, and there is a $50 gift card involved if you decide that you would like to. Well, if you've had a stroke and fit that criteria, over 65 and having had a stroke. So please check out the tables in the back. In addition to Alert 1, there's a resource table next to it, kind of, that has all kinds of materials that might be useful for you. There are restrooms through that exit and down the hallway to your right. There's pizza in the back as well as bottled water in that bright cooler. And finally, I want you to mark your calendars. We have a wine down coming up November the 6th. It's at the University Winery, and we're offering you a free glass of wine and a chance to talk to senior care professionals as well as connect with other folks who maybe are also caregiving. So we welcome everybody. I hope that you can attend that. It's again November the 6th, 4:30 until 7 o'clock. And if you've never been there before, it's a great place to be. I now would like to introduce our speaker, Rebecca Cruz, a new mom and owner of Life Speech Services. And I'll let her tell you a little bit about herself.
Perfect. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Excited to be here tonight. I spent all day talking to my baby, so it's nice to be out and talk to some adults today. I'm going to present tonight on not all memory disorders are created equal, communicating with someone living with Alzheimer's and other dementias. So a little bit about me. I'm a wife to my husband, Zach. We've got a rambunctious chocolate lab named Jockey. And in May, we welcomed our little girl, Avery. I was supposed to present, I believe, in March. We had that terrible rain. The event got canceled and then had a baby, and here I am. So I'm glad to be here, like I said. And then, as I said, I'm a speech therapist. And in 2021, I really started to feel the need that we needed more functional, person-centered therapy. I've been working in the nursing homes through COVID, and I felt like there was such a disconnect between our patients, those that were caring for them in the nursing homes, and then also the family members who, during COVID weren't able to come in. And so even with our short-term patients that were coming into the center for rehab and then going home, I could work on something with the patients with dementia in the nursing home. They could be doing great with it. And then going home, there'd be no carryover because I couldn't connect with those carryovers. So I started my own private practice, Life Speech Services, to really bridge that gap and to do therapy in the home with these patients who needed it most. I want to talk a little bit about what a speech therapist or speech language pathologist is, because most of the time when you hear a speech therapist, somebody's talking about a speech therapist in the school system, right? Working with their kids on how to say their R's or their THs. But what I love about my field is that I can work across the spectrum. There are speech therapists that are working in the NICU with little babies who are just learning how to swallow. You've got your school-based therapists, but you also have therapists working with adults who maybe have a stuttering issue or want to work on their accent and making their speech clear to communicate towards the later stages of life. We have a lot of therapists working with patients who've had strokes or those diagnoses of dementia, MS, Parkinson's, where their body is starting to break down and they're having changes in their memory, their thinking, their communication, as well as their swallowing. That is one big area that I do a lot of work in as well, is swallowing. So the 6 main areas that myself as a speech therapist can work on is speech, the actual articulation and intelligibility of words, communicating clearly. Language, which covers the comprehension of language, the understanding of what people are saying, and then the expressive side of language where you're communicating with the right words and getting your point across. Under that language bubble, we also have reading and writing. I can help somebody with their voice, whether their voice is raspy, hoarse, if they have a chronic cough. There are different exercises and things that we can do to help with those muscles. Social communication skills, thinking about those social cues. Sometimes somebody after a stroke, they kind of lose that ability to engage appropriately. And so we work on role playing and scripting, as we call it, to come up with how do you engage appropriately in these conversations and interactions. Cognitive communication skills, so those are the thinking skills, your memory, problem solving, attention, executive functioning, all of those skills that you need to really do your everyday life. And then lastly, as I mentioned, swallowing disorders. So making diet modification recommendations, implementing some compensatory strategies to help somebody eat and drink safely. So tying that back to our loved ones with dementia, there are 3 areas that primarily I work with somebody who has dementia, and that would be language for them to communicate with their loved ones clearly, and then also those caregivers and loved ones communicating back with them, so that way there can be, equal understanding, and it's not just a one-sided conversation. Those cognitive communication skills, so figuring out some memory strategies that are going to help somebody remember the things that they need to and engage in their daily life. And then lastly, those swallowing disorders. As somebody progresses in the stages of dementia, those muscles don't work the way that they're meant to. And so oftentimes we're providing recommendations to caregivers on how to provide food in ways that are going to help this individual be able to consume it, or providing, again, just different recommendations. Maybe they need a chin tuck, maybe they need to turn their head a little bit, things like that. Before I move forward, any questions on what I do as a speech therapist? Like I said, a lot of people hear speech therapist and they think of a speech teacher in the school. So that's why I like to start with a little bit of a background as to why I'm here, talking about adults. So going into the different changes in communication, I broke this down based into the early, middle, and late stages based off of the global deterioration scale, 1 through 7. So starting with those stages 1, 2, and 3 for the early stages. Before I go into that though, I'm sure you've all heard the phrase, when you met one person with dementia, you met one person with dementia, right? So everybody with that diagnosis is going to be a little bit different. So these are just the general changes that we see, but you might see people who in the early stages, they're really having trouble with their communication. Or you might see somebody who in the later stages, that's just when they're starting to have more trouble. So like I said, these are just the general things that we see, but everybody is a little bit different. So in the early stages, generally their communication skills are still intact. You're still able to have a pretty coherent conversation with them. We'll start to notice some mild changes in that receptive or comprehension of language. They might not follow directions adequately or provide an appropriate response to a question. And that goes right along with some of those early memory changes that we see in dementia, because they might not remember what you told them to do, or they might not remember the answer to the question that you're asking them. And then we start to see some mild changes in their expressive language. So they'll have trouble thinking of the specific word to things. So maybe they won't remember where you went on vacation, and they'll say, oh, we went to that place last summer with the beach house and it was yellow, and they can't quite get to that name of, oh, we went to Hilton Head, but they're able to kind of describe it in terms of, talking around that word. Or you might see that they use the incorrect word, like maybe if you're sitting at the table and, whatever you're eating, they might want the pepper, but they might say salt instead. And then you hand them the salt and they're like, no, I want the other one, the pepper. So those are kind of the starting changes that we see often in those beginning stages. In those middle stages, generally, they're typically able to still express their basic wants and needs. You know, they can tell you they need the bathroom. They can tell you that they're hungry or they're thirsty. But you'll find that they start to repeat themselves over and over again. So maybe you'll take them to the bathroom and then 10 minutes later, like, bathroom, bathroom, bathroom. And maybe they do need it again. Maybe they're just stuck on that word and they can't express anything else that they need. They're going to start having more trouble understanding those complex directions. You've really got to simplify things at this point. You'll notice their speech kind of rambles. You might have a conversation with them and they'll just talk in circles. You know, they'll tell you that same story 4, 5, 6 times. And we start to see more behaviors. And I have behaviors in quotes because we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But behaviors are just ways that they're trying to communicate something with you. So often in those middle stages, we start to see some of those behaviors coming up. And as we get into the later stages, their primary way to connect with the world is through touch. Whether they are reaching out and touching you in a kind way, or if they're, you know, slapping you to get out of their way, or how you're interacting with them. They really pick up on that facial expression, the body language, again, how you're approaching them, what your body language is like. But then you can also learn a lot by watching them and how they're acting. Even though the words they're saying might not make sense, you can tell from their tone of voice what they're thinking and what they're feeling by just tuning in a little bit closer. You might hear what we call word salad, where it's, again, just a bunch of random words that don't make sense, doesn't form a coherent sentence. You might even hear just words that aren't real words, just a bunch of jumbled sounds together. Some people may be able to respond to very direct yes, no, or one-word answers. For example, like if you show them a cup of coffee, they might be able to shake their head yes or shake their head no. But again, it's got to be that very direct communication to get that response. And oftentimes that's because it takes them so long to process things as they get later in the stages of dementia. You know, it's going to take them a lot of time to process. Okay, they're asking me if I want this cup of coffee. Then they have to think, do I want that cup of coffee? Am I thirsty? Do I want a hot cup of coffee? Do I want cream or sugar in it? And they don't really have that processing as it is, but their brain just goes round and round and round on that question. Any questions on the stages and things that we often see? Yeah.
Well, not so much a question,
yeah,
but
sure.
a comment.
Yeah.
They said quite a few years ago, it's interesting, you said about middle stages, and I think this a little bit had an uncle, and even my mother to some degree when she passed away a couple of years ago, but especially an uncle where you could tell he's getting dementia because he would tell the same story over and over and he communicated. If you just sat him sitting in the chair, he'd get the first couple of words out, so to speak, and then it'd be the exact same story. Then 10 minutes later, the exact same story. So that's interesting that's the middle stages. I would have thought that, but he wasn't to this stage yet.
Sure. Yes, and again, everybody's a little bit different in their stages and how they progress. Yeah.
Are the people who have dementia, as they go through this, are they aware of this?
Again, it kind of depends. Oftentimes in those early stages, they'll recognize that something's not right, you know, and that typically starts with they recognize that they're forgetting things that are important to them. And then they might notice that they're saying the wrong word. So really at those early stages, they might recognize it, but as they progress, then they lose that ability to think through those things. Good question. Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit more about that, first of all, connecting primarily through touch?
Can I actually come back to that later?
Sure.
Perfect. Yes. Remind me if I don't touch on it, but it's in here. Yeah.
I've noticed my mom is just speaking less in general. Where does that fit in to all of this?
So I would say the middle to late stages, because they're having a harder time thinking through what they want to say, coming up with those words. And the other thing we see in these stages is that they're losing their desire to engage. They're kind of starting to come inside themselves. You know, if you think about like going into a cocoon, they're curling and they don't want to go out and do as many things. They don't want to engage. They just kind of want to be by themselves almost.
I have a question.
Yeah,
My wife is kind of the yes and no
sure.
thing. I mean,
Yeah.
She will acknowledge things.
Mhm.
Eating, do you want the word? Yes.
Yeah.
You want this? No. And conversation is very limited.
Yes.
It's mainly that. Every once in a while she'll say, will you get me? It stops. Is she having trouble coming up with the word, what she actually wants? Or doesn't she know what she actually wants?
My
That's the, can you get me this? And then I don't know, it's a yes.
Yes, exactly. So that's kind of that vague speech that she's getting to. She knows she wants something, but she can't remember that word of exactly what it is. Or if you think about sometimes if you go into the kitchen, you're like, oh, I know I came in here for something, but I don't remember what it is. That's kind of what she's experiencing, where she's like, oh, I need this item. And she might even be able to picture it, but she doesn't have the words to get it out. And so your best bet is to kind of go into that guessing game of, okay, what might she need right now?
That's kind of where I am.
Yeah.
And I always feel bad because I think she knows she wants something. She can't verbalize it.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, now what?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we'll talk a little bit more about what to do in these stages when they're experiencing these things. But one recommendation right now is if you can show her a variety of items, you know, and then maybe she can pick out of those what she wants or needs.
That's what.
All right. So as I mentioned earlier, behavior. Behavior is all communication. They're trying to communicate something with you that they can't get verbally. Behavior is a result of an unmet need that they can't communicate verbally. Or it is because of a challenge in their reality. So we often talk about how these individuals with dementia, they're leaving our reality and what we can comprehend around us and stepping into their own world in a way. And so even though they might be perfectly safe and content in your home, they might not recognize where they are. And that might make them start to feel anxious. And you're not sure why they're standing up, looking around all the time and, you know, trying to get out. But it's because in their world, they don't know where they are. They're scared. They feel alone. So it's all about becoming a good detective and figuring out, okay, what is going on here? And that's really step one when you're trying to communicate with somebody with dementia who's in those middle to later stages and is having some of these behaviors. So we do need to learn to listen. If they do have some of those verbal skills, what are they actually saying? What words are coming out? They might not quite be the right words, but maybe here and there is a word that is right coming out. Watch their actions. Okay, what are they doing? Are they looking around? Are they rummaging through the kitchen? Are they opening all sorts of doors? Use that as a cue to kind of help you figure out what they need. And then it helps if you know your loved one. Know their past, know some of the things that they like to do, so that will help you take a better guess of what they might need or what they might be looking for. So for example, my dad, he's a mechanic, he's a tinkerer, okay? He likes to always be busy doing something. So if I saw my dad, you know, starting to open doors, pull random things out and mess with them, my guess is he might be bored. He's looking for something to fix. So again, having that background knowledge can really help you be a good detective and figure out what your loved one needs. So once you're able to figure out, okay, what is going on, or at least have a general idea, that's when we can step into their reality and engage with them by asking them good questions. And again, this can kind of help you be a good detective by asking them, well, where are you? Figure out where they think they are. What day is it to them? Maybe they think it's Tuesday, or maybe here's a good example. Maybe they think it's Sunday and they think they're missing church, but it's really only Tuesday. What do you have to do? This is a good question for somebody who's up, again, kind of rummaging, kind of antsy. Figuring out who they think you are. They might not recognize you as their spouse or their child. They might think that you're a stranger, which unfortunately is a really hard thing for you to deal with. But once you figure out who they think you are, you can again step into that reality and help them work through that challenge. So I have a couple videos in here from some dementia experts online who do a really, really good job of explaining some of these things. So this is Adria Thompson of Be Light Care Consulting. I highly recommend checking out her resources and her videos online. But I like how she describes here stepping into their reality.
With someone with dementia can be a challenge. Conversations can get really hard or really weird. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to leave your reality and step into their reality. In your normal life, you value what is real and what is true. When it comes to communicating with people with dementia, we have to set that aside. In the old days, we did a lot of reality orientation. We argued with them, we showed them evidence of things, and we told them they were wrong constantly. Because of a degenerative disease that's happening in their brain, they don't know what is real and true anymore. So to hold them to that standard is just not fair. When you go into a conversation with someone with dementia, you are going to literally sometimes take a deep breath, let go of your desire to be right, and imagine yourself literally stepping into a new place. In this space, you are going to listen.
So we'll finish the rest of this video here in a couple minutes. But I mean, how many of you have had to do that before? We literally take that deep breath and say, okay, I need to listen to them. I need to step into what they're feeling, because even though they might be so upset that this place where they're at is not their home, I need to recognize that, okay, they're feeling really scared, and step into that.
Could you tell your name again?
Adria, A-D-R-I-A, Thompson, T-H-O-M-P-S-O-N. Yes, and that's Be Light Care Consulting. It's her company. Light, yeah.
Say it again, Adrian.
Adria, A-D-R-I-A, Thompson. Yes. Be Light Care Consulting is your company. So, what we do when we step into that reality, we do what we call reflective listening. We're listening with empathy and understanding what they're saying. You know, you validate their feelings, and you know, again, what they're saying and feeling might not be accurate, it might not be true, but if we go in and say, you're wrong, you are home, you're safe with me, they're not going to be able to understand that or reason that, because they're losing that as they go through those stages of dementia. So that's where we need to validate their feelings.
Living in the home that they have lived in for the past 40 years, start saying, I want to leave. I want to go home. The reality side of you wants to scream, this is your home. You're in your home. Leave it here. If they're really sad and sorrowful, then we need to reflect that too in our facial expressions and our words. Validation, we need to consider what that might mean. Home is a place of safety and security. So maybe in them saying they want to go home is them communicating in a way that they don't feel safe or comfortable. So we might say back, you want to go home. I hate the feeling of being homesick. Tell me about your home. Are there 2 stories or just one? Did you grow a garden outside your home? Validation is not about lying. It's about making them feel heard, acknowledged, valued, respected, and safe in a world that is turned upside down for them.
So again, that idea of speaking to them and using phrases like, I'm sorry you feel that way. Tell me more. Tell me more about your home. Tell me more about what you loved about your wife when you're, when you have a spouse who's saying that they're missing their loved one. Or, oh, it sounds like you're really upset. You're really frustrated. You seem sad. You seem like you're going to cry. What can I do for you? And just, again, echoing back to them in that same tone that they're speaking to you. So, like she demonstrated, she had that sorrowful response to them and just really stepped into that with them. So once you're a good detective and you figure out what they're thinking, what they're feeling, and you step into that reality with them, then it's going to be a whole lot easier to redirect them into what's next or get them onto something different. So you can redirect in a way that makes sense. So if she didn't know that this individual was feeling homesick and she just, tried to redirect her to go do a puzzle or something, it wouldn't work because she didn't actually address the issue of being homesick. But once they kind of built that rapport and that idea of, you're feeling homesick, I'm really sorry, and they have that conversation about the home, then it's easier for that individual with dementia to say, okay, this is a safe person. And so maybe I will go do a puzzle with them. Maybe I will go have a cup of tea with them. So this is another really great woman. She, I believe, is a neuropsychologist, and her name is Natalia, and she's with Dementia Care Blazers. And I just really love what she does in this video to, again, step into that reality and then redirect.
Police! Call them! Somebody's stealing my thing! Nobody is coming in and stealing anything. We've probably just misplaced it. Yes, they are! Call them now! Let's approach this a different way. Oh, okay. You know what? Let's get as much information as possible for the police so we can help them out. Will you help me fill out a police report? Let's do that. This is going to be so helpful for them. You did such a good job. Let's grab some tea while we wait.
So you can see how she heard what this individual was upset about. She provided a solution. Sure, was she actually going to file a police report? No, but it made this individual feel heard and that their concerns were actually, understood and respected, and it wasn't just blown to the side. And then she could redirect to that cup of tea. Yeah.
I talked to a couple actually at a conference that was about dementia, and they were both actors, and they said it's very much like improv. You're stepping into somebody else's reality. So I thought that was a good comparison.
Exactly, and it's a lot easier to step into that reality when you know your loved one and you know what things are kind of going to make sense in their mind. So you can play that role of who they think you are. So I have a couple of scenarios here that we can talk through a little bit. So let's say your mom is asking, what time is it? What time is it? What time is it? Over and over and over again. Use your good detective skills. What would you think for your loved one? Good, that's a good question. Where do you need to go? What are you waiting for? What's going on today? Yeah. This video is from Dementia Success Path. Yes, Dementia Success Pathways. And I like how she handled this question.
Is it? Oh, it's 5:30. What time is it? Oh my God, I just told you. Is there something you're worried about? I don't want to be late. Late to what? My hair appointment. What day of the week do you usually have your hair appointments? Saturdays. Okay, no worries. It's Tuesday. I'll help make sure that you don't miss it, okay?
There you go. She figured out, okay, what is she concerned about? What is she worried about? What is she afraid she's going to be late for? Okay, it's a hair appointment. Okay, that's a pretty easy redirection. It's not today. And even though she might ask that same question again later, it'll be easier to redirect because she kind of already had that thought in her mind that, oh yeah, it's not today. So my other scenario here is your mom keeps asking where her mom is, who may have passed years and years ago. Any thoughts on how you could redirect or step into that reality with her? Yeah.
Maybe just say it sounds like you're really missing her.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a really great way. You're really missing her.
She's wanting something familiar.
Yes. Yes. And sometimes we do see that as these individuals enter into those later stages, they remember those early years. They remember their parents, maybe even their grandparents. Or one reason they might not recognize you as their kids is because they still think you're this big. Or, you're still just a baby and they don't recognize you grown up because those memories aren't there anymore. So here's how this woman redirected.
Mom? Where's my mom? Betty, you're 90. There's no way your mom is still alive. I don't know what you're talking about. I just need to find my mom. Where did you last see her? Not long ago. I just need to get home so I don't get in trouble with her. We don't want that either. You're here to help us with some dinner. I'll call them on the landline to let them know. Are you sure? Positive.
So again, rather than arguing with her and trying to reason through, your mom isn't here anymore, your mom has passed away, she redirects, she figures out, this woman doesn't want to be late to get home. I'll call and I'll let them know that you're here with us, helping us, and then move on. Any questions? Thoughts?
Mom? What?
All right, so now we're going to kind of go into some of those strategies. We talked about the challenges, we talked about being a good detective, stepping into that reality, and now let's move into some things that you can do when your individual or loved one is starting to have this trouble communicating. So, easiest thing to use is simplify your words. Rather than using these big, long sentences, keep it short, keep it sweet, use words that they're going to understand. Talk slowly. I'm pretty sure all of us have a bad habit of talking fast. I mean, I wrote slow up here on my paper. Slow myself down. So with these individuals with dementia, it takes them a long time to process. So we need to slow down and then give them that extra time to respond. Even as long as 15 seconds, 30 seconds, sometimes even up to a minute for their brain to process what you said and to give a response. Asking those yes and no questions like we talked about earlier, keeping it very, very simple. Yes, no, or do you want this or that?
Regular milk, soy milk, almond milk? Milk. I said milk.
Whoa. Okay, if this looks familiar, it may not be that your person with dementia can't hear you. It may be for a few other reasons, and I'll show you what to do instead. 1, make sure to use few and simple words. 2, make sure to give them 90 to 30 seconds of process time. 3, give them visual cues. And 4, just put it in front of them.
So again, I think one of the most helpful things to do is those actual visual cues of showing you the items the best you can, of what they might want. Something else that can be really helpful, and sometimes we forget about, is making sure that we have their attention first. When you walk up to your loved one and just start talking, they might not even realize that you're talking to them until you're already at the end of your question, and then they don't even know what you asked because they didn't know that you were talking to them. So saying, hey Betty, would you like coffee? Do you need the bathroom? And making sure that you're looking at them, they know that you are speaking to them. And especially when it comes to care, making sure that you're explaining to them what you're doing. If you go in and just start pulling somebody's socks off or their shirt off or trying to give them a bed bath, arms are going to be swinging. So again, getting their attention first, explaining very simply what you're going to do, maybe showing them, if you're going to help them brush their teeth, showing them that toothbrush and saying, okay, this is what we're going to do. So that way they are aware of what's going on.
Give the dog a kiss. I'm gonna put your chair up, okay? Ooh, here it comes. I'm gonna change your socks, okay?
There you go. So again, just showing what you're doing, explaining it very simply before you go ahead and start doing things. So alongside those verbal strategies, the words that you're saying, it's really important to keep in mind those nonverbal cues that you're giving them as well. So getting their eye contact, being down on their level so they can see you're looking at them. That's again another cue that you're actually talking to them and they need to pay attention. Quieting down the environment, maybe turning down the TV or the radio, or moving them to a space that's a little bit quieter so that way they can really focus on what you're saying and respond to the best of their ability. Again, being down on their eye level and providing visual cues to them so they have an idea of what you're talking about and they don't have to try to think of what is coffee. they can actually see, oh, okay, I know what that is. I do want some of that. And again, being very aware of our body language and our tone of voice when speaking to these individuals. They can still pick up on those things. So if you come running in and seem very frustrated, maybe you're not frustrated at them yet, but they pick up on that in your voice. And so what are they going to do? They're going to get more defensive, be a little bit more agitated with you as you're trying to do, whether you're trying to talk to them or provide some care for them. And again, same with body language. If you're standing there, folded your arms while you're waiting for them to do something, you're going to tell that you're probably a little angry or frustrated with them.
Communication tip you can use anytime you're talking to someone with dementia. We know that in dementia, it often impacts language, meaning they might have a hard time understanding what you're saying. They might have a hard time speaking what they want to say. They might have a hard time picking up the words you are saying, like the speed at which you are talking. They may not be catching every word. This means your tone of voice and your body language is more important than ever, even more than the actual words you are using. This will require you to shift how you normally communicate. You could be saying the sweetest words, but if your body language and your facial expressions and your tone of voice is tense and stressed, your loved one will be picking up more on the stress and tension than on any of the sweet words you are saying.
And I really, really love this quote by Maya Angelou. It wasn't necessarily said in relation to dementia, but I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And even though our loved ones with dementia, they might not remember who you are, might not remember that you are their son or their daughter, but when you go into that room, they're going to remember how you made them feel. And if you make them feel safe and heard and respected, you're going to have a much better engagement and conversation with them than if you just go in guns blazing and start chatting it up with them. So any questions? We're going to go into some specific strategies for each of those stages we talked about earlier, but anything from that chunk of information? Yeah.
Going back a few scenarios here. Sure. My mom passed away about 3 years ago, and a lot of good points, a lot of good feels. But I don't think one thing you didn't touch on, at least I didn't feel it touched on, is going back to when, they're asking questions over and over and over. My mom, she did try for 3 or 4 years. She was in a nursing home and she would get it, say, honey, where are my keys? Honey, where are my keys? And stuff like that. And, and it wasn't as easy as it sounded.
Sure.
What I didn't hear you say, but what I'm number one, pretty patient, number one, but also you really get used to the art of distraction. Meaning she was a big baseball fan. She had baseball, so when she would ask 2 or 3 times, honey, where are my keys? Where's my purse? Stuff like I'd say, hey, who won the A's game today? Say, did the Rockies win today? And that would distract her from that. So that's one thing I didn't hear is that I thought worked very well. That's just one particular scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. And because you knew her and you knew her favorite things, you were able to distract her probably a lot easier than some of those aides that might have been in the home because you knew that about her.
Yeah.
So when she was asking that, you could get her to something else.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, it's usually not that easy. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about what I read in somebody's book I read called Therapeutic Fibs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't like that. I really don't. I've never been a liar, but that is very difficult for me to say, oh, well, yeah, you're not going to go home. I'd rather say, you're going to be here forever. I'd rather than say, oh, I want to skip through another week yet. It doesn't come very easy for me.
It's not. It's really not easy to have to, as you said, fib or lie to your loved ones because you want them to know the truth. But the unfortunate thing is they can't process that, and probably telling them you're going to be here forever is going to terrify them and it's going to upset them more. So, you could try with your loved one to explain it, but depending on where they are in the progression, it's probably not going to. And one thing that I'll hit on in a minute is generally in those early stages and sometimes in those middle to late stages, depending on how good an individual's ability was to read, sometimes reading is a really helpful thing. Making them a little, sign that says maybe, your car is in the shop, the shop has your keys. And she sees that note, oh, okay, my car's at the shop with my keys. That's where my keys are. So if you can, maybe coming up with a little sign or something that'll remind her. And if you want to have those harder conversations with them, you're here at the home forever. Again, just writing down that so that way if she can't process it just auditory, seeing it written can help too. Any other thoughts, questions before I move forward? Like I said, I like having back and forth conversation today. This is good.
I'll just add,
Yeah.
I took care of a man whose wife had died after 70 years of marriage. And he was in facility. I would go in and he would ask, where's Mary? And a lot of the people that came in and out of the room working with him, he would ask that to everybody. And people would say, George, she died.
Oh.
She died 3 months ago. And he'd start to cry again. So I started to say, she's in the laundry room. And he would be fine with that. I mean, it is a lie, but in his moment, he was relieved and just fine.
Yes.
And that went on for months.
Yes. And that's where you kind of have the choice of, do you tell him the truth and continue to get him upset? Or do you tell him something that makes sense? Because my guess is that woman probably spent a lot of time in the laundry room, right? That's the spot where he would find her and he's like, okay, that's where she is. It's okay. She's safe. And then he could continue on with his day. Yeah, another really good example.
But I also found too that you need to be consistent.
Yeah.
Because my mother has now, she's in the middle stages.
Okay.
And my sister and I talk on the phone, so she calls her and I call her. And we found that now we are calling each other before we even call mom, just to make sure that we stay consistent. Or doesn't that really matter?
It depends again kind of on that stage. If you're saying the same thing, though she might not exactly remember it, it'll be a familiar response to her. But she might say, oh, I have heard that before, where if you're changing it all the time, it might be a little bit more confusing. So if you can stay consistent in those earlier, 4, then, it matters a little more. But as she progresses, she won't remember anyway. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. All right, so some specific strategies as we go through those stages. The early stages, you want to start using those 1 to 2 step directions, keeping it very simple, telling them to do one thing at a time and showing them, hey, put your socks on, handing them their socks. Avoid arguing with them because they're losing that ability to reason through what is going on. Again, they might have that recognition that something's not right with my mind, but they can't quite understand I have a degenerative disease that's making my mind not work right. Using those visual aids as I hit on, and written cues. As I mentioned, reading is usually intact for these early stages. Again, it kind of depends on how well the individual read before. If they were an avid reader, they went all the way through school, maybe had some college experience, their reading will remain for a while. But if you have somebody that maybe didn't finish school or never liked to read, that might go a little bit faster. So if reading is intact and their vision is okay, that's something else to keep in mind because vision changes can make an impact. Use reading to your advantage. Write little notes. Make a memory journal. Make them a list of things they need to do during the day if they're in that early stage in that home. Middle stages, this is where it's really important to get that individual's attention first. They kind of start with that tunnel vision, that tunnel mindset where they're just focused on what they're doing. So you need to kind of enter that space so they know that you're talking to them. Continue giving those simple commands. Really just 3 to 4 word sentences and commands at this point. Avoid using pronouns. And even though, you can use the name of your daughter, Sally, for example, she might not know who Sally is, but it's easier than you saying her or she went to the doctor, because when you use those pronouns, you've really got to think back to remember who you're talking about. Or if you just use their name over and over again, it's a little bit easier to make that connection. Using real objects as cues, showing them what you're talking about, showing them what you want them to do. Starting to avoid those open-ended questions, really focusing on what we call closed questions. Yes, no, this or that type of questions. And then in our late stages, one-on-one communication, making sure there's not any distractions going on. You're really looking at each other, using really slow, short communication phrases. A gentle touch to get their attention. So, coming in, putting your hand on their shoulder or your hand on their hand, so that way, again, they can look at you. Yes, no questions if they're able to respond. Showing them items at their eye level and engaging their senses. So this is where I want to hit on touch a little bit. So specifically somebody who's at those more end stages, one way that you can really be there with them is sitting there with them, holding their hand, putting your arm on their arm. Those gentle, soothing, comforting touches can be really memorable because, again, that's another way that you're making them feel safe. You're not just coming in the room and talking down with them. You are there with them. You want to be with them. You want to be engaging with them. Something that there's some research in, and that I haven't done a lot of looking into yet, but those late and end stages, maybe if your loved one really loved the smell of lavender or mint, getting one of those diffusers and putting that on in the room, they say that sometimes that helps that individual with dementia in those later stages kind of hone in and come into that space again and sometimes even better luck. I don't know, like I said, there's some research out there for it. I haven't looked into it yet, but.
So my mom,
Yeah.
doesn't have a sense of smell
Okay.
anymore. Except I don't know if it's that she doesn't have a sense of smell anymore or that she can't access that to verbalize it.
Sure.
Is it worth trying even if it seems like she doesn't?
So what stage is your mom in? Would you, if you had to guess?
I mean, honestly, I would have said in the earlier
Sure.
stages.
Okay.
But because she's still went to the grocery store
Yeah.
and she was able to
Yeah.
get around okay and
Sure.
find things on the list
Okay.
with some help.
Yeah.
So
something you could try is just putting on maybe a scent that she really likes and just see if that maybe helps keep her calm if she's having a lot of behaviors. Just see if that maybe makes her feel more at home, makes her feel more comfortable. Kind of, again, that comfort idea, making these individuals feel safe in the space that they're at. Sure, absolutely. All right, any questions there? Yeah.
You mentioned earlier, like they might slap your hand away. What are some other ways that they might be using touch instead of communicating?
So, if they're slapping your hand away, they probably don't want you doing whatever you're doing, So another way that they might interact with you is, again, if you're sitting there beside them and you're being really soft and gentle with them, they might reach back out to you. They recognize that you're a safe person. And again, even though they might not be able to know who you are, they might sense that you are somebody who loves them and that they love. So I like that idea of touch as a way to kind of step into those later stages and hoping that they will then interact with you. Does that kind of make sense?
I have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
My wife's late stage.
Okay.
And when she's eating or something like that, there might be a choice of things.
Sure.
I find that I don't offer her the choice as much as I can. I might say, do you want a donut? Do you want a cookie?
Okay.
If there's no response, I'll say, this cookie really looks good. Would you like one? And she'll say yes.
Yes.
So I've tried to eliminate choices for her. That seems to work.
And
Not that
sometimes,
I don't do it,
yeah,
but if there's no response after 20 or 30 seconds, then I try to guide her.
sure. So one thing with that is, let me ask you this, do you also have a donut present or are you just?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It's a visual thing.
So you've got both of them in front of you?
Yes.
Okay. So if she's just looking at it, then yes, kind of presenting one over the other. I'm sure maybe if you gave her a cookie or broccoli, she's probably gonna go for the cookie, right?
Well, she would never just words
Okay,
don't mean anything. It
Yeah.
has to be a visual thing. She has to see it.
exactly, yeah.
Because
So
otherwise she can't make a choice.
I think if you're at the point where when you give her two options, she's still not able to pick one or the other, presenting one first and seeing which one she'll take is a good way to go. And part of this is figuring out what's gonna work for your loved one. As I said at the beginning, every individual with dementia is so different. And the more you know about your loved one, the better and the easier it'll be for you to interact with them and know what's gonna work for them. And it takes some trial and error. Some things might work, some things might not work. Some things might work one day and don't work the next day.
So this gentleman's story I find rather interesting. I feel like when I visit my parents, my dad is quick to say, hey, should we do this? Instead of more open-ended and saying, what would we like? What would we like to order on the menu? Where would we like to go for a walk? He's more directed. And I wonder if that's, I don't want to judge my dad because he's spending all this time helping my mom. But at the same time, like when I'm hanging out with her, she makes choices and, I give her options because I'm only there, once a month or so.
Yeah.
And I feel like, maybe I've just got more time and more patience. I'm not on the schedule. At what point should I encourage my dad to continue to allow her to make choices, or should I let him do what he needs to do for his peace of mind and just be more directive? And is she then losing those options and is it getting faster for her because she no longer has to kind of do the work of making a choice?
I wouldn't say the progression would go any faster by not having her make choices, but let me ask you this. Was your dad always the one to kind of make the decisions and do things?
Always like their whole lives, right?
Okay, so that's
dad just being bossy.
so that's fairly normal, right? So your mom is probably in a way kind of used to that as well. So, maybe encouraging him to give her options would be good, but again, if he's always kind of steered the ship, it might not change. But there's no harm in that.
So my experience with my wife,
Yes.
like you said, things are specialized, but a menu would be overwhelming.
Yeah.
It would just scramble her brain. She would be all over the map. So it has to be narrowed down to one or two things. And she still can't do it, then suggested choice.
Yes.
Menus used to be, she was a little bit better. We would go to a restaurant. I'll get what you're having, because she won't want to face making a choice from other choices.
Yeah, and one thing that I like to do with my clients as they're kind of getting later in the stages, if they still want to be able to go out to eat or their loved one wants to be able to take them out to eat, what I'll do is I will take the menu from that restaurant that they like to go to, kind of figure out what would be the common items that this individual would order. And I would just maybe put 4 on a page. They like the chicken salad, they like the hamburger, sometimes they get fried chicken or, something else, a ham sandwich or something. I put those 4 items on there, and then we go to the restaurant, and rather than giving them the big menu, I just give them that one menu with 4 items and pictures, and then they can look at it and pick. Might not work for everybody, again, just depends on the stage, but something else to use, those visual cues to help them figure out. So, how much time do we have yet?
You're good.
Okay, because I was just gonna say, I have a couple, we've had some chit chat here, which I love, but, you all have faced communication challenges or behaviors with your loved ones with dementia. So what are maybe some more that you face, and how are you going to try things differently based on what you've learned tonight?
So I think with my mom, because she is in sort of the early to middle stages, it's been really hard for me to figure out that's where she's at and to understand that she's got her own reality now. And so that has been very helpful to sort of think about that. And my dad is with my mom, so she can come.
Yeah.
It might be helpful for him. But I sometimes, both of us sometimes have gotten frustrated with her. And I'm hoping this will help me with that.
Yeah, and literally sometimes you've got to take that deep breath. Give yourself a minute
Yeah.
And then step in and say, okay, where does she think she is?
The grocery store I was there right before, that's why I was late.
Okay, yes.
It was way more challenging than I thought it was gonna be.
Yes. Oh, yeah, and that might even be a little more overwhelming for her because all of the choices and all of the people and the lights and people with dementia become more sensitive to loud sounds, crowded areas, lights, things like that. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. And that's one reason, I think we talked about it a little bit earlier, why they start to not to like to go out and do things as much anymore because it's harder. Yeah.
I think one of my personal challenges is my husband has it. And my nonverbal gives me away at every turn because, you have to enter into every encounter with patients that I may not have at the moment and I didn't have 50 years ago when we were married. And, I have two children who live in the household as well. So that is allowing for enough time and allowing for patience and living in his reality is my personal challenge because I'm not that patient.
Yeah, it takes a lot of patience, a lot of grace.
I can empathize with your dad, but I was not the ruler of the household. He was. So it's been a complete role reversal over the last 3 years. And it's just an overwhelming adjustment. One you make, one you willingly make, but what an experience.
Absolutely, absolutely. Your thoughts? We'll go back here. Yeah.
Using your menu scenario that you described with the choice written and the picture, does it progress to is an earlier stage maybe just 4 choices typed out, then both, and then just the picture? Does it progress that way where the words become less and the pictures become more?
It kind of depends on your individual. And again, one thing to keep in mind is their vision. That can decline over time, but and it takes some trial and error. So maybe starting with just the words and see how they do with that. Can they read and make a choice from that? Or do they need the pictures and the words? I usually like to keep the pictures and the words together. And so rather than going from just words to words and pictures to just pictures to doing just 2 pictures and words on a page, kind of limiting those options.
I don't think you've touched on it, but my mother-in-law, I think maybe they call it sundowner syndrome. She doesn't know the time of day and she's up several times during the night making coffee and feeding the dog, and we'll tell her, go back to bed. It's going to be 8 hours before morning. And I'm always the one that presses and tells my husband, tell her to look out the window, and if it's dark, go back to bed. He says, that doesn't, I could say that a million times to her.
She can't process it.
We live right beside her, and she still lives in her own home. And we have a baby monitor that reaches that far, so we can see her every time she gets up at night. So, of course, we get no sleep because the monitor goes off. But is there any way to help them through understanding sleep? Go to the bathroom and go to sleep.
I even bought her a clock and pushed the button and tell her the time of day, AM and PM.
But she wouldn't understand AM and PM.
Yeah.
Or she'll say, I've got things to do. I'll sleep this evening or something when it already is past midnight.
So sundowning is a tough time because that's when they're already kind of at that heightened agitation. It's harder to redirect. So in that situation, like you said, they can't process that AM, PM. They might not even be able to look at a clock and understand what time it is. So, if she's always getting up and making coffee, well, do you know, can she read still, or is that kind of, okay. So one thing that you could try with her is taking away the coffee. Is that the primary thing she does first thing when she gets up? Okay.
And we have a program so that it goes off, shuts off, after an hour or something, so we don't have to worry.
Okay. So again, it's kind of trial and error, but something you could try is maybe you take away that coffee maker and you leave her a note that says, your coffee maker broke, I will bring it by in the morning, go back to bed, and then see if that works. Again, you might have to tweak the wording for it to see if something like that would work. Again, something for her to read. Or maybe rather than taking the coffee maker away right away, just put a note on it that says, coffee maker's broken, I'll fix it in the morning, go back to bed. Unplug it, yep, and
She would see us.
fair, that's fair. But trying something like that to, again, rather than trying to explain to her, it's 3 in the morning, go back to bed, something that she can go and read and see if that cues her to go back, especially if that coffee maker is the first thing she goes to every single time. That might help her that if she goes back to bed and then gets up an hour later, she'd come back, see that same note, and hopefully go back to bed. That's something you could try. You could try a note on her door, on like her bedroom door, if she would be able to read that. That may they put up like at bedtime that says, go back to bed, or I will come get you in the morning. Again, you're kind of going to play around with it, but something like that might work. All right. Well, it's been a pleasure being here tonight. My information is back there, and I can stick around here for a little bit if you have any other questions. Unfortunately, right now with my new baby, I don't have as much time to come over the mountain to see clients in person, but I can do some caregiver consultations and things through Zoom and teletherapy like that. If that's something you're interested in, we can talk about that, or feel free to reach out. My email, phone number, all that is back there on those cards. But thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. There's still pizza over there that's calling your name. So please help yourself, and hope to see you both next month, where we're having a discussion about final conversations that you may have with a loved one. Jackie Magany Hook is going to be the speaker. She's great, really. And she does a lot of work through Cook Funeral Home. So that will be our next presentation. Right before that, though, is the wind down on November the 6th. So we hope we see you there. It might give you a chance to interact more with other folks to see if they have, what they're going through. And I always think having other people interacting is a good thing, and you get more out of it. I am a stickler for wanting to have people come here, even though I know with Zoom and all these other things, it's so much easier to stay at home and click on the computer. But you lose something when you do that. So anyway, thanks again. We'll hope to see you next week or next month.
Yes, thanks for coming. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Sure. Yeah.
That was terrific, Joe. I mean, I've been to several,
Thank you.
Alzheimer's things, and I said, "Why are you going to go again?" I said, "Because it's a different person, and you always learn something new, even if it's one thing."
Right.
It really helped.
Yep. I
She
agree.
was really good.
She was very
Oh,
good.
she's too
I kind of felt the same way.
Good job.
Take care.
No.